Right, okay, we'll move on to item 7.2, which is our carbon emissions inventory. You've got to love roadworks. There's roadworks everywhere at the moment, and yes, I got caught in that roadworks just north of Ohara this morning. I decided I'd try chance it, and no, I sat in queue as well. So, yeah, no worries. No, you've walked it right in on time.
I'm sure they finished.
Okay,
Alexander Road, but not that one.
So now we'll move to item 7.2, is our carbon emission report.
Okay.
Led by Anne and consultant Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor Adrian. Morena koutou. We're presenting this morning the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory Report for the 2024 financial year, covering council's organisational emissions. And this is introducing Kevin McGrath, who has prepared the inventory for us as part of the CoLab working arrangement. So this is the second emissions inventory that council has done, and it is 3 years after the first report. The inventory is one of the deliverables in the Climate Change River Map project and contributes to the goal of growing knowledge. It also aligns with council's strategic direction, where one of the goals is demonstrating and advocating for climate-friendly and community-resilient initiatives. Producing the inventory is in line with the Auditor General expectations for councils to measure and report on their emissions, and it fits with council's obligation under the National Emissions Reduction Plan to have regard to the actions and outcomes in that plan. From a community expectations perspective, our customer survey this year asks one climate-related question, namely, how important is it for council to take a leadership role in responding to climate change? There's a scale from 1 to 10. If we take the answers from 6 to 10 as indicating a level of importance, the 6-month results so far show that 59% of respondents answered positively to that question. So this inventory report helps to demonstrate to the community that council is actively monitoring and managing its own greenhouse gas emissions. On a practical level, the information in the report can inform discussions about where emissions reductions could most easily and effectively be achieved, especially where those reductions also make sense from an energy efficiency, cost reduction, and/or energy security perspective. While the inventory reports exclusively on our organisational emissions, it's also worth noting some of the things that council is doing that have a positive impact on our district's emissions. For example, council support for community native planting projects, composting workshops and other community-led sustainability actions, and council's curbside refuse collection, which is enabling separation of household food scraps from general waste, as well as in-house ongoing monitoring and management of energy usage across our operations. All these are making a positive contribution to our emissions, our environment and our community. Next steps from here with the report will be to produce an easy-to-read summary of the results, include this summary on a Climate Change River Map webpage, which we're developing, and set up monitoring of additional emissions sources, especially refrigerants, so they can be included in future reports. So I'll now hand to Kevin just to run you through some of the key findings of the report.
Good morning, everyone. Kevin McGrath, Director of Power Solutions. Again, my apologies for my tardiness or lack of punctuality.
It's fine, you just came in the middle just at the right moment.
Perfect timing. I'd like to be. Anyway, thank you. And perhaps we could just start with this slide here. So the carbon inventory, as Anne mentioned, this is the second carbon inventory for MPDC. And this table here shows where carbon emissions have moved from the first FY21 carbon inventory. They have tracked up net emissions slightly from the gross emissions of 2670 up to 2803. So maybe we flip back to that first slide, which shows where the emissions, essentially the emissions profile. So by far the majority of the emissions are generated from wastewater treatment, and they are biogenic emissions. This profile that you're seeing here is a fairly common profile for most councils. The numbers will change, but the profile of what we've seen there is fairly typical. So there's been quite a marked increase in biogenic emissions for wastewater, as you can see there. So the blue is obviously the current emissions inventory that we're talking about. Electricity has dropped. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the emissions factor for electricity has reduced, and that's purely because New Zealand's national grid is becoming more renewable, and that means that emissions factor reduces. So electricity is a very green form of energy, and there's a significant drive to electrify industry and transport, purely because of our very renewable national grid. You can see the next key emissions are all fuel related, so diesel and petrol. So that's council's fleet. We've seen a slight uptick in both diesel and petrol. Then we track into the what really are the more minor or the lesser impact emissions. I shouldn't say impact, the smaller emissions for council. Natural gas. Natural gas is, there are really only two sites for council, with the main site being the Morrinsville Pool. There is a very small gas load at the Waharoa aerodrome. But equally with transport, there's a real need to migrate away from the burning of natural gas. Not only from a carbon perspective, as we're talking about here, but also financial risk perspective, because the natural gas supply is diminishing rapidly. So I'm happy to take any questions that take on. That has been opened up, but there's been some action in that space. But the gas market is dire. The gas reserves are declining very rapidly, and the price is going north very rapidly.
Pop your lights on, please.
Sorry, mine was upside down.
Yes, Bruce.
So you're saying gas is depleting? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
If there was new reserves opened up, it wouldn't, would it? It would be if they actually started looking again, the gas reserves may significantly increase, may they not?
I think that's.
All right.
Yeah.
Kevin, just to clarify for me, the units, those wonderful numbers, is it tons of CO2?
Sorry. Yes, they are. They are tons of carbon dioxide equivalent.
And over what time frame? Are we talking about 3 years or per annum, or?
This is an annual. Yeah. So we're talking about the emissions for the FY24. So from July through to June 24.
So this is just from the electricity we use, not from the production of electricity, obviously. Just based on the electricity we use, that's how much emissions we create.
The electricity.
We don't produce electricity in this one.
And the solar units on this centre.
So that's just
Correct.
based on the electricity we're using.
Correct. So for all the kilowatt hours, council users. There's actually two components there. There's the electricity that you actually use through your meters, but there's also, you do incur what's called Scope 3 emissions for the transmission and distribution of that electricity. So the emissions that are incurred to get that electricity to your gate for your use, and it's another line item on that. It's very small, but that becomes a function of how much electricity you actually use.
Quite ironic that all this talk about electric cars and things, and our CO2 emissions for diesel and petrol and all has gone up. We can't do anything really about electricity, I guess. But the wastewater, which is what we are, one of our core infrastructure scenarios, is skyrocketing. So it's nothing we can do about that.
It's just, if you, I guess the question is what's the opportunity in the wastewater? I guess if we're changing from to mechanical treatment, will that reduce emissions?
I'm not a wastewater engineer,
No.
but
We're moving into the
we have discussed this. I think what this demonstrates is that biogenic emissions are a key emission source for council. So in the process of redeveloping wastewater treatment plants or even retrofitting plant, it should be a focus that your designers, your engineers who are looking at these processes should have this in the back, not in the back of their minds, but it should be one of the considerations that are taken to reduce emissions.
Opportunity to make a difference.
if there's a possibility. Yeah.
I know Brian's not an engineer, but I'm sure he has a.
I'm a quiet person. Thank you. Coincidentally, we had this discussion yesterday at the executive team meeting. We've seen this report before as an executive team, and we find it's very useful for us to enable us to consider where we might focus our efforts. Also helps us to reinforce what we're actually doing now, which is not lose sight of that. But the size of the wastewater, or the contribution of wastewater, obviously posed the question for us. But what I would say is, in the current design of the Matamata wastewater treatment plant, there's not really an opportunity in terms of the treatment process to reduce the emissions. However, in the construction process, there are things that we can do, and that we've asked in other words, what type of materials are being used. And the other thing is what some other councils have done, one in our area, is in redeveloping a treatment plant, they've also used or reclaimed areas, I understand, from oxidation ponds to put solar farm in. So actually offset solar farm.
Okay.
So I think that the beauty of these kinds of reports is that it enables you to stand back and reflect and say, okay, what are we doing? What else can we do? And as Anne pointed out in the introduction, particularly where there's a good business case to do things, and that's been very useful for us to, as an executive, to review this report, because it has highlighted some opportunities for us. And of course, look, we don't know what's going to happen with the waters, but the point was made is if the waters scenario does change and we are no longer directly responsible for wastewater, that profile suddenly brings a lot of other things into focus on things that we can actually do. So really, really useful for us to see this. And Kevin actually works with most of the Waikato local authorities, I think, in this area. And so we're able to learn and get information from him on what others are doing. And there are some opportunities from a business efficiency aspect that we're looking at.
Thanks, Roy. Caleb.
So I have two questions. Firstly, what is its total carbon dioxide emissions production equivalent? Okay, is that the amount? What's the equivalent part?
Am I on?
Try again.
That is the standard unit. So the greenhouse gases encompass more than just carbon dioxide. So the CO2 equivalent is an accumulation of those greenhouse gases into a single measure, and that's the standard measure for greenhouse gases.
Next question.
Sorry.
Can someone just turn their light off? We've got so many lights on.
So is there a chance that we could see the numbers of just the carbon dioxide produced? Or is that a bit too in the weeds?
You mean total?
Only carbon dioxide?
Yes, but you're then excluding other quite aggressive greenhouse
I understand that, but my interest is in the carbon dioxide production. I understand we're looking at also methane, water vapor, CFC,
nitrous oxide,
and all those other things. But my interest is in the carbon level production. Sorry, carbon production level.
Wastewater. The ones are carbon.
Well, in each of the CO2e numbers, there's takes into account carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. This is a standard way of presenting, and it meets the protocols for creating a carbon inventory. So that's why the question that you're asking, that information is available.
I was just going to say, if they understood the reason for the drill down, we might be able to work through what we might need to do.
My reasoning is carbon dioxide is the one that most people are primarily concerned with. I understand methane and CFCs and nitrous oxides are also greenhouse gases, but a large focus is the carbon dioxide production. And I just want to see a more particular view of the carbon dioxide production.
And can I add there that perhaps just to know, because if we could increase the carbon dioxide, good for the
Maybe just a ratio of what each one is.
well, we do need to raise it, don't we, so that we can have grass grow rather than trees grow.
Yes, this is just the first report that we're receiving, so there's a few questions there, getting quite technical, and just follow on from there. So, Bruce, did you have another?
Well, yes, I did. The interesting thing there was Kevin talked about the wastewater, and your report says that you've got a plus or minus 40% error factor.
Yeah.
So that throws that whole thing. Wastewater could be insignificant in this, or it could be so much worse. What are MPDC's emissions as a percentage of New Zealand's emissions, and what are they as a percentage of the world's emissions? To give us some perspective of just how significant we are.
I get where you're coming from, Bruce, and I don't disagree with you, but I guess the thing is that everybody in the whole planet could use that argument to go and stick their head in the sand, and then we don't get anywhere. To me, and I've said this before, councils have got lots of issues with wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants that need to be upgraded, and we're talking billions of dollars through the country, and I mean that has to be kind of priority number one. But where I see this kind of information being useful is if you've got projects on the table already, then we should be looking at those projects to see where we can reduce what our footprint is. Whether we're significant or not significant, I think that's where our responsibility kind of lies, is what can we do better in the process of doing what we're already doing. And then this is where this is interesting. So I guess that's kind of like, I take what you say, Bruce, but
Yeah.
everybody can't have their head stuck in the ground, otherwise we still have this gone. Well,
Which was my final question, or the follow-on is how is this report going to show us how cost-effective use of our resources and provide some cost benefit to the ratepayers?
So, for example, when we looked at the plans of the vehicle emissions, for example, it prompted the question, why has it changed? Why has it gone up? And there's a question about, in all of these surveys, about the accuracy of the data. But what it's enabled us to say is, we would expect that trend to be different, but also we can do things ourselves to make it different. And over time, the data will get more confidence around that. But for example, in plant utilisation, productivity, that's for other reasons that was on my radar. This helps bring it on the radar, and in relation to a question that another elected member raised that might be related to this, it enables us to take what I would say a careful assessment of the cost and benefits of the composition of a fleet. And from a little data that I've looked at, that what potentially comes out of these studies is actually maybe not the composition of the method of fueling or energy, the energy that you're using, but actually whether you're actually got too many vehicles, for example, that you can actually optimize your fleet. So that's one very, as I say, that's on my radar for another reason, but this helped reinforce that. So I'm looking at a study around that, which has another, to Councillor Horn's point, it will potentially probably have an emissions benefit, but it has a cost benefit to the community. So that's the alignment of the two. I think that's the kind of comment that just illustrates what Anne was talking about, where there are business opportunities that arise from this focus.
I think that's the purpose. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move to, so your question.
Mine was really about the cost benefit and.
Yeah,
what-
perfect. So we've got that.
And I think one was just around the practicality of, when you look at that data and electricity, I take your point that, we are trying to move into the renewable space, but I'm also aware that as we sit right now, the gap between being able to rely on renewable and the reality is still quite a distance away. Hence why Huntley is still doing its thing and all that kind of jazz. So therefore, if we went out tomorrow and stopped our fleet full of electric cars, we are actually putting a lot more pressure on the system and would actually be burning a lot more fossil fuels to be able to charge those vehicles. So it's that balance of looking at the actual practicality of what we can do, and we don't want to be caught in a virtue signaling little thing before the infrastructure can catch up. I had the joy of having an electric car for work for about 2 weeks last year. It was a very long 2 weeks because I don't have a charging station at home and all this thing. So it was a practicality of actually plugging into the supermarket and wandering around in circles for an hour while it was charging. So it's just the practical stuff, and so that's what my my comments are about.
Well, I was just going to mention it. Yeah, just another example. You're right. You're absolutely right. I was just thinking of another example of where, like the Matamata Civic Centre is an example where we were able to put some solar panels in as part of the design, and we get some benefit from that. But Kevin has pointed out to us that for example, we're doing something about our office. I mean, most of our power in this office is consumed during the day. And so that's when we would get most benefit of actually having solar panels, rather than having to store the energy, which is, as I understand, it's still going through some technology needs, but actually generating power here during the day while we're operating at the peak time could make very good business sense. So as I said before, the report helps us, it raises that question for us. And to your point, Councillor Dewhurst, so where do we go with this? Well, the first one on my list is plant optimisation, utilisation. That's the first one on my list, but also not losing the opportunity as new projects come up to say, okay, what can we do in this space because it makes good business sense as well as other sense.
Thank you. So Peter,
Oh, yeah, Kevin, my question comes from my own curiosity and hopefully with your knowledge, you can give me an answer. I mean, I don't propose that council runs out and plants hectares of trees to soak up all these bad carbon gases, but I'm just curious to know that, you know, to soak up how many hectares of forest, of mature forest, would be needed to say soak up 1,000 tonnes of these CO2 related gases? Any ideas?
I don't have that metric at the top of my head. I apologise. But it would be wrong for council just to leap straight to offsetting. Considering there, so you know, instead of your 2,800 tonnes of emissions, you suddenly buy 2,800 tonnes of a carbon credit. That's not doing the environment any good at all. We should be actively reducing with a target and a projection to a point to get to as low as you can before you then offset. And you would only offset if you had that desire to be carbon zero. But the purpose of this document is really to put a line in the sand. This is where council's emissions are, the quantity, and also the emission sources, so that planning can be put in place to manage those. Can I just answer one of the questions? Just in response to the data, plus or minus 40% for the wastewater. There's two aspects of calculating these emissions. One is the unit of what you're trying to capture. So for wastewater, it is cubic meters of inflow through the wastewater treatment plants. That is then multiplied by an emissions factor, which gives you the kilograms of CO2 equivalent. So you multiply the unit of, and it's same with electricity, it might be a kilowatt hour by an emissions factor. The actual data that we were able to get from council is deemed to be accurate. The plus or minus 40% for wastewater comes by using a New Zealand average emissions factor for wastewater treatment plants. Now, not every wastewater treatment plant is the same. It's different sizes, different treatment processes, but in the Ministry for Energy, for the Environment emission factor data, they have a single emissions factor for all wastewater in New Zealand. That's where the plus or minus 40% comes from, because there will be variance in the plants. A way to ensure that that's accurate for NPDC is to actually go through quite a rigorous process of data capturing at each of your wastewater plants to be able to calculate that emissions factor for that individual plant. And Water NZ has a process for that. It's quite a rigorous process, but there are councils that actually do that. That would be a way that you could ensure that those biogenic emissions are calculated accurately. And it may result in a reduction. It could well result in a significant increase.
One last question, please. I appreciate you've got a lot of information that you're trying to get in a very amount of time. What is the emissions factor? What is this? Because it sounds good, but what's the high point data? Could you send that to me? It's correspondent. What is the emission factor?
There's a document here which is the national. I can send that through.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a Ministry for the Environment document that's used.
Great, thank you. Well, with that, I think we've had a fairly robust discussion and a few questions and challenges. And it's our first. So we've got two recommendations here that the report be received and the council will provide feedback on the inventory and any next steps. So I guess it'll be around understanding those numbers more in detail for those that are really close to it, and that's what you basically said around the summary of the report. That will be the next steps to build that understanding. So, Unless you've got anything to add, Benara, I think, like the document's got a lot of supporting information in there, and it's good to know where we're tracking. Business will be on.
So with that in mind, Your Worship, happy to move both items 1 and 2.
And so any feedback, we specified any feedback that we look forward to learning, understanding this.
I'd like to see the benefits and.
Yeah, understanding the benefits and analysis of this report. Do I have a second? So yeah, we just second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Second and so. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Harry, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, everyone.
You're getting back to Rotorua now. You could always go a slightly different route.
As long as you're not going to take Highway 1 at the moment, you just struggle to get anywhere.
Probably just head from Amaroo and out should come through, go through a bit of Tower Road, then head.
All across the Mamakoos too, are all roadworks, so I've stopped.
Oh, yeah.
Quarter of an hour.
Correct, weather for roadworks.
We shouldn't complain.
And we shouldn't, because you know that we're going to be in a good place.
We complain with roads are dodgy and we complain when there's roadworks.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, till Friday. Okay, I'll now move on to items 10.3. Thank you, Ryan. Sorry we had you come down early just in case our presenter was caught in traffic. So thank you. So 10.3 delegations, the addition of Land Transport Act 1998.
Yeah, so Ho Whakamanu Hapori Tu Tohu, which is Community Compliance and Protection Manager. My technical title. That's it. But yeah, we're here following the workshop to see if we can get CEO delegated under Land Transport Act, the ability to appoint parking wardens. Yeah, just that's my only visual aid up on the screen there, but that's just an example of a very recent complaint, the kind of issues we're looking to deal with, where if you imagine a mobility scooter or someone with a pram, not only they can't use the footpath, but then they've got to go out. There's a car park there. You'd have to go right out onto the road in a situation like that. That's
yeah, you've got a power pole just immediately in front too to navigate, and then there's a U-turn behind in front as well, so it's multiple vehicles.
Yeah, and then that car on the road's got no number plate. So all three of those cars shouldn't be where they.
And that's not a water job.
Was it?
Police.
No. Well, like they do have the ability, and I guess speaking from. Yeah, well, when I was in that side of the business, used to have carbon copy infringements you could write out, and you do all that thing. But they moved to phones to issue infringements, and on the phones there's no parking loaded into them, so it's not saying they can't do it. It's just saying they're moving.
And
they're making it clear.
They've got better things to do.
Yeah, move away from stuff like that. Yeah. So I mean, we did go out and see these people and got them to move their cars, things like that. But if they choose not to, then we don't.
That's
the tools we need to deal with that.
It's safety.
Sorry, Jeff. Yeah, I know, but I mean, it could have been a health emergency. Someone could have been having a heart attack. They run there in the Park River. You can't just take from a picture that's terrible parking.
It's the same.
It might be just
Few days that
yeah, exactly.
I guess this is just all part of the painting the picture though, and initially this will be an education process.
Yep. So they get asked to move. They don't move, then we deal with it, or they're back the next day doing the same thing, and we can deal with an infringement.
James, you could say something.
Yeah, no. When the time comes, I'm happy to move the recommendation as it's stated on the page. in the agenda. And I think it really speaks to the challenge, not so much the first part, but the giving some power to deal with things that are resolved through communication and education prior to that. So I certainly don't see this as any signal from the council in terms of being headed around investing resources or imposing on the community, but just having a tool in the toolbox to deal with really problematic things that can't be resolved through other not to touch it. So when the time comes, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, James. Bruce.
Look, when we discussed it before, I said, just tell us what tools you need. These are the tools you need. I'm happy to second the motion.
So I've had this question asked. Well, that's actually a good question. You write out an enforcement notice for someone blocking a footpath. They don't pay it after 2 weeks. You go out, you write them another enforcement notice. How then do you enforce the enforcement notice? Because the paper in itself is all good and well, but people will want to know, and I can think of a couple of places, and the house on Mayfair Road is a great example of where they park cars in a funky manner. How would you enforce at a practical level getting those vehicles moved? Are we going to contract those services to a tow company? Are you going to get the locals to work out a big tow rope and start moving things away?
Yeah. Be highly unlikely, but part of the research around this, I have been in touch with other councils around what they do and things like that. And I do remember from the police, if you needed a car moved and it was parked, no one was with it, you could include the towage fee on the infringement notice. You bring a tow truck, you say tow it to somewhere safe, which could be 10 metres down the road. And then that just goes on, that whole fee just goes into the windscreen or to the registered owner. I mean, that would be an extreme example. If it was a high safety thing, I'd expect the police to be involved. But yeah, it's like any infringement. If they don't pay it, it gets lodged with the courts, and then they chase that up.
So that's operational. We give them the tool and as governors, then that's what they do. Operational is up to them.
Good to us. So, all with that, if there's no further comments, sorry.
Just to comment on the slightly amusing side, thank you, Ryan, for including the national infringement list. I find it quite amusing. All these things have been parked in the wrong places. The best one down here is parked on a level crossing.
Yep.
Interesting.
At your own risk. Yeah, I think the thing is that there are some things that are occurring in our community that aren't quite right, and this is an opportunity just to, and it's about social conscience, right? You know, people being inconsiderate parking on footpath, people parking on yellow lines, obscuring driveways. You know, they're just it's the social conscience here. So it's a tool that we're now enabling the team to enact. So I've got James moving and Bruce seconding. James Sainsbury moving and Bruce Jugett seconding. That the information be received, that we council delegates the CEO and the following powers under the Land Transport Act 1998 and any rules and regulations made under that act. We've got section 128D and 128E to appoint parking wardens under section 128D and issue warrants. Some very complex. And number 2, general to take enforcement action, including any prosecution under this act, and these rules and regulations together with the power to make any decision pertaining to such an action. And 3, council recognises the CEO will sub-delegate these powers to the appropriate staff. Thank you, Ryan, for this piece of work. And obviously you've looked at other councils. I think that's the important thing, is what do other councils do and how do they operate? So it's always a good guide. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. Right, we'll now move on to item 7.4, which is was Carolyn with the approval of NPDC submission to the RMA consenting and other systems changes. We took amendment though and got Nathan. Nathan.
Morning. Sorry, you have to give a double whammy of the ball brigade today. So
at least I got your names right.
Yeah. So Carolyn's away today, so it's me. Yep, so the government has released the RMA, another RMA amendment bill, which is consenting and other systems changes. It's the, I guess, second phase of the sort of whole RMA reform process. The amendment bill is largely technical in nature and is designed to make it easier for us to do certain things, and I guess designed to sort of speed up the consenting process for certain specified infrastructure and renewable energy things. So I see we've only got 5 minutes, so I'm happy to take it as read.
I did read it and it is quite.
Yes, technical.
So, yeah, I'm happy to prove that you did what you had to do.
I'll hold that for a second. So it's potentially moving. We'll go to a second. Just the question I had was around the hearings. We opposed the, it was well down in the document where, you know, and I was at the meeting last week where Minister Simon Court spoke to it. And the thing with hearings is that it does add time and complexity and cost. Is there a balance to be achieved where a hearing could be avoided? I think staff already worked through that process to avoid a hearing if possible, if there is a balancing of submissions.
Yes.
For some conditions.
Yeah, so at the moment you have to have a hearing if the submitter, if a submitter or an applicant wishes to be heard in support of the application or submission. So you have to have a hearing, but if they don't wish to be heard, then there's an option not to have a hearing, and typically we take that option because we don't want to go down the hearing route because it is costly. But I guess the RMA is a participation. It's a participation process, the resource consent process. So there is a balance to be had. So yes, it does make it certainly easier if we didn't have a hearing. But again, giving the people to speak to their submission is quite powerful. And I think if, from a planning perspective, having words on a piece of paper versus having someone sit there and speak to their submission is quite a different beast. So yeah, I take the point. And it's, yeah, there's positive and negatives.
Yeah, because you know, like the words that the minister uses, there can be some vexatious objectives.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And they certainly get found out in the hearing process, but by then it's too late. The applicants had to stump up for the cost of that hearing process. So,
and this is one of the concerns around RMA and the process taking too long. But anyway, if
I do believe that we try and work everything through before
yes,
giving
absolutely.
Yes.
But Ellie saying that
yeah,
by discussion and whatever we avoid quite a bit.
yes. Sometimes you can't though. If they want to be vexatious, then that they will take it to the very end. And that's just
the process that we follow.
Yeah.
That's great. Alrighty, well, we had a mover and Sue moved and James Sainsbury seconded, so I'll put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carry. Thanks, Nathan. We'll now move on to item 8.1, which is the Civic Financial Limited Statement on 10th of 2025, and Laura is presenting it this morning. Thank you, Laura.
Adrian, and good morning, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to formally report to Council the Civic Financial Services Limited Statement of Intent for 2025. So Civic Financial Services Limited, they provide superannuation services for the local government sector, and the company is owned by local government. Our council holding a 1.09% shareholding. And you'll see in the report there, the statement of intent has been attached for your information. It notes financial projections and some performance measures for the year ahead. With an audited report to follow by the 30th of April, which will also report formally to you. And just to note, under the LGA Government Act, this company is exempt from being a council-controlled organisation, so also exempt from the reporting requirements of that Act. However, we're just reporting this for your information. And yes, the statement of intent is there, and also happy to answer any questions on this item. Thank you.
Any questions? Bruce?
Did they ever come before us before? 'Cause I don't-
Yeah, potentially, because we've had a call on Monday.
I must have been asleep.
Yeah, it does, just as an information only item. The other CCOs. Back on the statement.
No, it's, that's
Yeah.
all right.
It's a
I-
difference,
I leave
yeah.
that.
Yeah. But this is-
So would you like to move that the report be received, Bruce?
Why?
Why not? Right here, Bas. No, thank you, Kevin. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thanks, Laura. And are you going to do, who's going to take over? Oh no, Livia's here. Good morning, Livia. We've got the 6 months report. That's 6 months report, July 2024. Welcome back, Niall.
Welcome back, Niall.
Welcome back to rural New Zealand.
Good morning. I'm presenting the 6-month report. That is data collected on the financial performance and the non-financial performance of July to December 2024, and it is reporting against the 2024 term plan that we set out in that plan. So thank you.
So this was obviously presented at the risk insurance meeting the other day. Any comments? Great to see the customers looking quite good. The only question I had was really around the public lose and that they've got to fail, but I guess it's because at 6 months mark they're looking over target. But if we have a less than, I think it's at less than 8, will be a green tick. But that's probably the only.
Yeah, it was just to highlight that we're not quite that as of yes, it's not on track, but it could well be that we get back into that.
Get back on track, yeah.
Still an improvement over 20.
Well, I think the thing is we got rid of the neither nor, the fence sitters, so they had to choose. So I think that's made a significant difference to people's responses in it, because that neither nor, if it was 30% of people said it neither nor, you know, it was always going to be a poorer outcome. Yeah. So it's quite good to achieve that.
Help me out here. Number of event centre bookings, the number of bookings maintained at 2,703. But we didn't.
It's been 6 months and double it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Brilliant. Sorry. There's another one we looked at down here. Seems to pass with the district. It's okay, see, it's not applicable, but anyway, I just thought that as well.
Any comments from the financial side of things? I think it's good to, obviously being over optimistic in some spaces, and that's been rectified in this year's annual plan going forward. You always get some unders and overs, but I guess the reality is that we must be over optimistic and be realistic.
Not a financial question. I was just looking at the building consents being processed.
Yeah, I've got that one as
time
well.
frames.
Yeah.
So 92.8%, which I mean sounds pretty good to me. 100%. Well, I guess my question is, if we can't do it at the moment when the buildings are really, really low,
It's not really.
it's not 100% is probably not really realistic. So yeah, what's stopping that from getting to that when I would assume that this is the less load on the system that we will see for quite some time and are likely to see in the future.
Not necessarily. I think we need to understand those numbers. Are our building consents significantly lower? I think it's a question you need answered.
Yes, they are lower, for sure. But what that's meant is we are using less externals and more internals. And we've actually got an IANZ audit at the end of this month. And there's still some areas of improvement that we need to make. But to your point about is 100% as a target, is that realistic? Well, it's the legal requirement. So you as a council can't put a target in that's not, you know, is not trying to comply. But the reality is this area is one we have to somehow get it. I'm not sure how many councils actually get 100%. Would be an interesting question next one.
Would be.
I don't know whether one of the big papers do.
I don't think that many.
No.
You can, the reality is you can have one that slips outside the time frame, and then it's a fail when you have a target of 100% compliance.
I think the important thing is the service to the community around the 20 working days, that if there's a request for more information, that it comes in the first 5 days and not in the last, in the last 5 days. I think that's where people get a bit concerned, but I think we've addressed that and not hearing as many complaints now.
Yeah, and I think the team are very diligent, and I think generally speaking, we've got my experience of it has been that our particularly our local builders are very complimentary about our performance. However, we have got changing demographic in that area, and we've got less experience in that area, and so what I'm saying is some of our inspectors, one of them is ready to retire. It's on a transition to retire, and we're trying to upskill other people. So there's a lot of reasons why we won't be achieving the 100%, but it's not because of effort.
Yeah, and I think
it's just that RFI thing, particularly also resource consents as well. People get really annoyed when they're to the wire and they've got to do it again. That's the thing.
So but I think financially, Lania, have you got anything you'd like to add from a financial perspective? I think it's all pretty well laid out there. You've lifted the bonnet and pulled apart the pluses and minuses of sitting. Yep, comfortable. And it's it's great that you're putting attention on budgets that for staff to, for the operational side, this is a budget. It's you can't just go overshoot. Peter.
Just a couple of queries. I think there's a few little errors here we need to address. So I apologise if I got that wrong. But on page 5 of the report, or page 57 of the agenda, it talks about the community use of our pool facilities, and in the July to December, it talks about 70,704. I wonder if that figure should be 69,954. Okay.
So yes, for this measure, the way that it's written is it's based on a 5-year average. So that's where that 70 comes in. But the total visitors for that elected skill period was, that's, as you said, it's 700,000, but it's taking into consideration of the average of visitors over the last 5 years within that same period. That's what comes in.
And then in the box below, it talks about it's got the red cross, because that's obviously it's not met the target. But if the target's less than 20 complaints, they've only got 11. Have we not met the target?
So they transfer yes, yeah.
Right. And the last comment I have,
10 we would be, 9 or 10 would be
11 times 2.
See, I sort of put the I think in the start of it, sort of say to myself. Anyway, and the last one is regarding the target of the water loss. Now, it talks about, 25% water loss at our target, or no worse than that. What are the dollar figures on that? And, is it really time to address that with, water meters down the track? But, what's the dollar figure of having a target of losing 25% of our water?
Well, all you have to think about is how much it costs us to produce water. And if you think that it's actually in excess of 25% at the moment, that's how much we're losing. So unaccounted for, I should say. So, you only have to think about how much we invest in plants and growth, etc., to think that's a big number. Now, I think there's an accepted level. In my head, it's somewhere in the 15 to 20%. There's an accepted water loss in a network that you would expect anyway. But we are well above that, and the pressure on us is not only from an accounting or cost perspective, but there's also from a consenting perspective that our regulator expects us to be more in line with industry norms. So it is a focus. We are, and as you know, we've got water meters. We've actually got some water meter implementation this year, but more particularly in the last year of the LTP, or the first first year, following year, we started programs to roll out water meters. So there's no question that it is a focus.
Any further questions? Kevin?
One that bounced out to me was the percentage of community satisfied that we provided with an opportunity to be involved in consultation processes, jumping from 40 to 73. Our target is to increase by 1% per year. That's
I think neither nor might have dealt with that.
100%. Yeah. So I think we're going to get a more realistic total figures from now on with that. Also, the resource consents, 11 out of 189 being processed on time. Again, externally allocated target, but I think that's pretty good considering our resource.
Yeah, I guess it's precious because but we're in, and I think going forward, we are staffed at a good level now in our planning team too to be able to manage those consents by the looks of things. So fingers crossed.
I'm assuming those are like outlier, bizarre type things rather than.
Well, some are more complex than others, right? And it's just nature of the beast. So I think there's some good trends here, though. I think the important thing is we're seeing a positive trend. We need to keep the pedal to the metal though, and provide the service to our communities and keep have their confidence that we are performing reasonably. Of course, the thing is that we can spend a lot of money to achieve a much higher standard, and it's that tension between our level of service and the cost to deliver. So I think it's just really mindful of those expectations that people might have on us to perform and to avoid missing the target. But that's the balancing act that we live in. I think you would agree. Right, would someone like to move that we received a 6-month report, and is there any feedback that we'd like to provide? No, if there's no feedback, I'm just happy for someone to move.
Thank you for taking out the others.
Yeah. Moved.
I'll move it.
And is there any feedback? Is it just number one that we're really? Yeah.
Just wait till the 12 months.
Yeah. So Caitlin's moving that we received a 6-month report. Seconder. Thanks, Bruce. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Positive. Right, now we continue on with Olivia and Niall with the audit management report, annual report for 23-24, item 8.3.
Yeah, so happy to take us through and answer any questions.
Yeah, I had lots of questions.
And there, again, this went through the Risk Insurance Committee the other day. There are quite a few actions that the audit sort of require. Recommend. We push back on a few. The team does push back on a few, which is fair enough at times. One of the challenges,
gritty, doesn't it?
It does. One of the challenges I have around our financials is that ability of the trial balances. Was it Sir? What's it called? Sir? Your program that you use. Civica. Yeah, Civica. Do lots of councils use that program?
Yes, so this question came up at the Risk Insurance Committee meeting as well. So I think there's something like 150 to maybe 200 authorities in Australia that use this particular package. In New Zealand, I think it's about 10. And in our part of the hemisphere, there's probably 3 or 4 packages in New Zealand that would be available to us to use, of which this is one. And there's not one yet that delivers what everybody wants.
Right.
So if I can just extend my response to deal with one of the other questions the Risk Insurance Committee asked, which is the concern that we were doing workarounds ourselves to compensate. But I believe that's what everybody is doing. And I think that the tools that we have to do the workarounds are a lot more efficient. So And I'm talking about specifically the 3.6, we're going to 365 in our environment. It gives us some particular tools that enable us to take data, and the integrity of that data doesn't change, but to actually do stuff with that data that the program currently doesn't do well. And that's a real opportunity for us that we're really keen on. And that's not only in the reporting space, but it's also in the processing space. So there's a light there. If there was a package that I could go to and say, yep, this is going to do it, we would have got it 5 years ago exactly. So that's a burden that we have. I know audits are not, they have a view, and I'm not being critical, they have a view that you should be able to just push a button. But I'd be very surprised if that's happening in any one of the local authorities at the moment. I'd say everybody's doing something with the core data to get it to a format that they can use in some way.
It's good to understand.
The complexity of AI and push technology now enables that sort of thing to happen on a local level, and we know what we want out of the system, so we get pushed into what we want, and it's, yeah, the guys are doing a great job. They're doing a great job. It's better to have that than have a third party do it and have to go backwards and forwards until you get it right. So
yeah, it's an interesting place. Like, to read that, you think, oh my goodness, there's not a program that actually works and makes it easier for staff. You know, like when you can't even produce trial balance easily. You know, like it's like, oh my goodness. But great to understand, and thank you for that clarification, because that was one of my concerns as well. You know, we got a lemon here but obviously there's lots of lemons out in the world, and we haven't got a solution. It's not a lemon.
Well, no, and I think to a point, I suppose, and I alluded to this in my CEO's report to the Risk Assurance Committee, I have a different view on some of these recommendations in audit.
Yeah.
I get what they're saying, but I have a different view because, you know, I've worked with the system enough to know when I can have confidence in it and when I can't. So, you know, from a risk perspective, I think we've managed that risk very well. Having said that, there are too many recommendations on the list. We need to get some of them off. And we've had we've got clear direction from the Risk Assurance Committee. There's a strong internal imperative to want to reduce that, because it just takes time dealing with them and having to talk about them every year. Let's get them out. So that's a goal that we have.
Good to hear. Any further comment about the report? No, we can have a mover of the recommendations. Is there any feedback? It's op number 4. Is there any feedback?
I'm going to move it.
So we have 1, 2, and 3.
1
and 3. Oh yes, and feedback. So just 1 and 3 that we note the recommendations and staff will be making improvements. So move James Thomas, second, and Kevin. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carrie, thank you. Thank you. It's a good piece of work and nice to be tracking in a good direction. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to 8.4, which is the Chief Executive Officer's report. Thank you, Manai.
Thank you, Mary Jo. What I would say about this report is the work in progress. In the same way that with the Risk and Assurance Committee, I reflected on what I thought I should be reporting. And I developed, and thank you, I had some feedback from the Mayor and the Chair about my first draft, and then changed the draft to hopefully meet the needs. I see the same thing here, that I want to be reporting information to you that you need, and that doesn't cloud matters, in other words, doesn't overload you. So for now, I thought what would be appropriate for this report was, because the Risk Assurance Committee had just been done, I felt it was appropriate that you saw that, because it does cut dry a lot of issues that are in play at the moment, but in respect of risk in particular. I also thought it appropriate that I just give an update on the key performance indicators at this point. The committee that will review my performance has given me some direction as to what they'd like me to look at doing, which I respect, but I just thought this was a good opportunity just to refresh on those KPIs and give an update on the status. I don't necessarily see myself doing that every month, but I just thought it was a good time. And then the project reporting, which I imagine there are areas in there that are very dear to your heart. that reporting framework, it's evolving. It's I wouldn't say it's maturing. I think we're still in the storming stage of the project reporting. We've got the framework in place, and we are now seeing the fruits of the framework in terms of the reporting. But we still have to mature in terms of our project management. So just a warts and all. And I would say it would take us at least to June, into June, and possibly a little bit longer for us to be 100% confident that all of our project framework is working properly. But the report we as an executive team are finding is very useful to flag things up to us, and so we can ask questions. But there are some enhancements that we probably will look to do to that. In terms of going forward for CA reports, as I say, I've still got some things that I'm reflecting on how what that format would look like for you going forward. Probably most importantly for me at the moment, I'm happy to take any questions, is to get your feedback on the things that you might want to see on it. So if there's something that, for example, you would say, well, I would expect to see this, or why didn't I see that? Those are the kinds of things I'm interested in understanding. Either, and it doesn't need to be today, I'll be happy to take that feedback any time. So it's a work in progress, really.
I think it's pretty thorough.
Well, maybe probably too thorough, to be quite honest. So it's a lengthy.
Well, I guess it's sort of
I'm just looking at how long it took you to do it for us. And whether, that was a chunk of your time, or whether it was getting your thoughts on paper, which, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And I was just going to say what I was told from because I shared with the executive team, they said, can we share that with staff because it's the managers, because it's a really good update. There are I ended up writing it down because there's so much in play.
Right.
And it felt good to get it down.
Yeah.
And as soon as I finished it, I thought, oh, there's this as well and this as well. So the time speed is actually about getting your thoughts coherent.
Right.
So,
Caleb.
Can I just say, I thoroughly enjoy reading the report, and I hate reading reports. So thank you for that. I really had no questions. I just wanted to comment on the ease of which the report follows. And obviously your thinking is very much like mine in the methodical, deductive manner. And so I'd be happy to move the all be received. And it's a fascinating insight, and I really quite think that I hate reports, and I quite enjoy reading this one. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Caleb. We'll hold that for a minute. Kevin.
I would just like to say thank you so much for putting in the key KPIs, because that list of KPIs and project updates and other, that's perfect. If anyone asks you a question, just go straight to the table, can instantly tell them where things are at. That I've been wanting that forever. There's a summary of what's happening. It's great. And the perfect blend of text and pictures. Right.
Can I comment that one just on those projects, for example, where I want to get to with this, to be honest, is that we are publishing something for you as an audience specifically, where you can go in any day and find the information, so that you don't have to rely on a report. That's the goal. That gives you that, you can find it straight away.
So you think a portal?
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It might take us some time because you've got to have all the foundation and working properly and everybody doing their bit. And Rachel, who collates this for us, goal, not there yet, but that's my goal, that it's actually online for you.
Okay.
Forgive me if I've missed anything here. There's a lot to go through, but when you kind of get these reports, a lot of them, for me, tend to focus on the things you're doing, the concrete mortar type projects, because I guess that's the stuff that is easy to see where it's going. Something I think that might be interesting is like when we had the meeting with the guys from the Parks and Reserves, where they had all of these, the aerodrome revaluation of the parks that they're going through and all those types of things, which are not concrete and mortar stuff, but it just seems like some of those guys get bogged down in details and there's no progress with, that sort of thing.
Administrative type stuff.
So, yeah, exactly. So to me, I think like it would be good to see some accountability and going, okay, well, we had, 15 things on our list. We've got through these 3 things and then now off it. So like I say, it's easy to focus on the concrete mortar stuff, but like, what's your building consents? What is our timeframes doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be just the stuff you're spending money on buying. There's also a lot of that stuff in the backfield too.
Yes, so that's a really good insight, because then I talked to the performance committee, my very first meeting, and we talked about things that the committee would want to see and one that wouldn't. And one of the comments that resonated with me was how responsive we are. And actually that's something I've been talking about with my managers and saying there's a perception that our organisation is not as responsive as it should be, either in building consents or resource consents or etc. I want to give factual information that enables us, but it doesn't only sit in those areas, it actually sits in lots of other areas as well. How we, the number of CRMs we're doing and how responsive we are there. What I'm wary about is that's very much on my radar to capture that, to say, to give you information to be able to say, we turn around 95% of our building consents within 15 days, that kind of stuff is, because there's a public perception and a national perception around that. So I've taken that from the KPI, from the Performance Review Committee, and I've got my team looking at that. I'd have to say, what I'm very wary of doing is overloading the report with that. Yeah. So I'm trying to find the sweet spot. But the general theme that I've taken, which applies to all of the teams, is let's be honest about our performance and give factual information about how we're doing. So that's very much one of the key things that I want to try and do. I tell you now, I won't be there by 30th of June, but we're taking. And here's another example. Sorry, another example of that is, and we came up with the discussion about communication and requests from elected members to staff, looking at a system that we can do that really efficiently as well, so that we can so that I can be accountable. So the things that come up in QA or through council that I can be accountable to you, and that you can see that you don't have to come and ask me where something is. The process is working. So that's very much part of the mix for me, getting that stuff captured in some efficient way.
I like as an example of how I like the information, which is easy, is like, when Kate does her health and safety reports, and at the end of those health and safety reports for the month, she says, we had 30 near misses, we had 2 of these, we had 4 of those, we had so many days off. And like another example of that is in your report here, we have, the following is a summary of the active claims from the last report, notified to insurance, active claims with insurance, which if you just have the basic 7 metrics for each person, and then each month you get what the last, or each 6 months, you get what the last report was, so you can compare whether the trends are going up or down. Something simple like that, it just shows actual numbers, and you just, that sort of thing is really easy to look at and see which way you're going.
Great.
I guess this is the sort of one of the first reports, and it's coincided with a 6-month report. So a monthly report might,
No, I don't know, monthly.
Yeah, I agree.
It's too much work.
Yeah. But it's just.
Yeah, we don't want to bog it
No,
down.
so.
I'm worried about.
Because a CEO report, how often do we require one? Is it every month?
Well, where I hope to get to, where we need to get to, is actually ensuring that our processes work so that it's actually not a lot of work. So the Build Life project report, the goal is to get it in the portal so that everybody's doing their bit. So it's actually really easy. So that's the goal, and that will be the same with any metric. I've said to the team, I don't want to create any more work for you to produce this information. I want to find out how we can get the right information, make it really easy. Now, in terms of my monthly report to you, this is quite full, but I don't expect to be, my next risk and assurance committee meeting, I'll be doing a similar report to them, and I would expect to share that with council. But on a monthly basis, I would see it a lot more condensed.
Change report rather than.
Yeah, exactly. Those and just making sure I've got the right, I've focused on the right areas to make sure that you're seeing those things. But I would see, for example, that efficiency indicator or KPI indicators that show that we're actually turning around these key areas at the level that we should. I want something really efficient, so it's very simple to present, but very simple to interpret.
Thank you.
Perhaps, I'm sorry.
Go. Sharon's probably.
I think you said.
Sorry, hit yours. I'll wait on it.
I just want to make a positive comment. Reading the review, the overview, highlights for me when we've done the restructure with management, and now you're coming in as the CEO, how much an alignment everything has become, and I think that's putting us in a really, really strong position as a council moving forward. It's just a lot clearer, for me.
Well, just on that point, I mean, we have, and I've said this to you before, we've got a great executive team, and so this isn't me, this is the team, and we've got a great team below as well with that. So we've got the right components. I think it's a little bit about just getting that clicking properly, and that's not a question. That's how we can get better. Sorry. Thank you for the comments.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah. 100% looking forward to that portal. Perhaps from a personal point of view, an overview of what's happening or has happened in external committees, e.g. the Urgent Committee, what's up to, what's coming out, the Te Mana Whenua Forum, what's happened, what recommendation have they put in, those sort of things. That would, but I mean, that as in a portal, that would work really, really well, because some of us aren't involved in those, but it would be nice to know. It'd be like,
no, it's a good point. If there's an opportunity to share information, and very useful.
I'm a member of one of those committees, and I keep up with.
Yeah, it's an ongoing one. Bruce.
Risk really dug into this quite deeply, all right. And one of the things that I took on board was the Rachel, the work that Rachel does to put this dashboard and stuff together. It's not a live document, so it's I would say quite an extensive, piece of work. And as long as we're getting information that doesn't, and I take it you're quite. I've got every confidence that you and the team are going to put something together, which means you're not spending all your time producing documents for sake of producing documents.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Brian. I think we've got a bit of feedback there, and I think we've got a lot of information. There's a lot happening. I think the reality is now we've come through that period before with COVID, and we were caught just spinning basically, and now we're actually getting things done. And I guess that's one of the opportunities around our capital spend and how we achieve that, getting our capital spend achieved each year, which flows through. It's never an exact science, but it flows through into the following financial years. Right, so Caleb would like to move that as before. Can I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Dave. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, that concludes our meeting for this morning. We'll now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.